Dear brothers and sisters, I wanted to talk today about a very important topic about our country India, why it is the way it is now, why it is lagging behind, why it is poor, why it is underdeveloped country or still a developing country. So many times we see that many of the Indians, they say that our country India is poor now because other countries like British, England, those countries have robbed India, and so India has become poor. Let us try and understand the truth, whether really those countries have become rich because of robbing the country India, or that they have become rich by their own strength. Let us go to Wikipedia, Economic History of India. Okay, so I am reading, and I will explain wherever needed. See, India was one of the richest countries in the world for about 2.5 millennia, starting around the end of first millennium BC and ending around the beginning of British rule in India. So this is saying that from 1000 BC until 1947, India was almost leading in economy. So in the beginning of British rule, by the beginning of 1800s. So from 1000 BC until 18 AD, India was almost in the top of the GDP among all the countries. So here we are able to see the graph. Around 500 BC, the Mahajanapadas minted punch-marked silver coins. The period was marked by intensive trade activity and urban development. By 300 BC, the Maurya Empire had united most of the Indian subcontinent, including Tamilakam, which was ruled by 3 crowned kings. The resulting political unity and military security allowed for a common economic system and enhanced trade and commerce with increased agriculture productivity. So here in this paragraph it says that India was actually not a united country, or it was not a united region. So it was ruled by different kings, and different empires ruled the subcontinent. And under the Maurya Empire, the subcontinent was united, and there was a common economic system that was introduced into this subcontinent in a large area. Still the whole subcontinent was not under one rule. So let us read. The Maurya Empire was followed by classical and early medieval kingdoms, including the Cholas, Pandyas, and the Indian subcontinent had the largest economy of any region in the world for most of the interval between the 1st and 18th century. So here what it says is that India had a very large region in the economy. So it was contributing to a larger economy in the world. From the 1st until 1000 AD, Indian subcontinent roughly from 1 to 1000 AD, India constituted roughly 30% of the world's GDP. In the year 1000, medicine estimated 28.5% of the world's population lived in India. So, world's population was 28.5% in India itself. See, the people in India were many, so the people resources, the manpower was much in India then. Other continents were not full, like America was not at all discovered by then, and no one, maybe very little population, maybe in decimals, people lived there. And here we understand that because of the population, the GDP was very high. India experienced per capita GDP growth in the high medieval era, coinciding with the Delhi Sultanate in the north and the Vijayanagaram Empire in the south. So here Indian subcontinent was already not yet united, and it was under different empires. By the 17th century, most of the Indian subcontinent had been reunited under the Mughal Empire. So, by the 17th century, this Mughal Empire reunited the subcontinent, the Indian subcontinent, because in medieval it was divided into Delhi Sultanas, and when the Sultanas or the Muslim invasion happened, it was divided, but under the Mughal rule, it again became a big empire. So here reunited under the Mughal Empire, which for a time again became the largest economy and manufacturing power in the world, producing about a quarter of global GDP. So here in India, the manufacturing was so high that 1/4 of the GDP was produced from this subcontinent. So Bengal Subhash, the empire's wealthiest province, that solely accounted for 40% of Dutch imports outside the West, had an advanced productive agriculture, textile manufacturing and shipbuilding in a period of proto-industrialization. So, in this we understand that India was producing very much, it was importing and exporting much, and India was having almost 40% of Dutch imports outside the West. By the 18th century, the Mysoreans had embarked on an ambitious economic development program that established the kingdom of Mysore as a major economic power. So we understand from this that Mysore kingdom was very rich then. Shivram Krishnan, analyzing agricultural surveys conducted in Mysore by Francis Buchanan in 1800 until 1801, arrived at India experienced deindustrialization and cessation of various craft industries under British rule. So when British came, it started deindustrializing and also cessation, which along with fast economic and population growth in the Western world resulted in India's share of world economy declining from 24.4% in 1700 to 4.2% in 1950. So here this statement says that when the British came, they deindustrialized, means they wanted to take and rule the country, the subcontinent, and so they wanted to impose their rule upon this continent. So they deindustrialized, and they also, whatever is produced, they have cessation. So they made lot of other rules that was imposed upon the industries that were in India. So while this was happening in the Western world, what was happening is that population growth started happening. That is because America was discovered, and it is a very, very large land. It is a very vast. South America and North America, very large lands, and so those countries were discovered, and the people went there and they started growing there, and the population started growing there, and the Western world saw a very fast economy growth. economical growth, because they have very big lands, and so their production would have been very large because of that compared to India. So when we look at it percentage wise, India's economical share became 4.2 in 1950. From 1700, that was 24.4% in 1700, it became 4.2 in 1950. And its share of global industrial output declined from 25% in 1750 to 2% in 1900s. So this decline is not because of the British taking away the treasures from India, because they cannot take the land from India. Of course, they deindustrialized, and they have done a certain amount of damage to the Indian economy, but on a whole, what is happening we will see. Due to its ancient history as a trading zone and later its colonial status, colonial India remained economically integrated with the world with high levels of trade, investment and migration. So we understand from this statement that though it was deindustrialized and cessations were imposed and all these things were going on, still Indian economy was integrated with the world, and with the high levels of trade, investment and migration was happening in India. So from 1850 to 1947, India's GDP in 1990 international dollar terms grew from $125.7 billion to $213.7 billion, a 70% increase, or an average annual growth rate of 0.55%. So here during the British rule from 1850 to 1947, India's GDP actually increased according to 1990 international dollar rates. In 1990 how the dollar rates were then recorded, how the terms were. So calculating on those bases, these people have arrived at a statement that 70% increase, or an average annual growth of 0.55 was there. So this was a higher rate of growth than during the Mughal era. So during Mughal era we saw that the Indian subcontinent came under was united, and then it was under one economic. So it was producing much compared to all other countries in the world. That time the Indian GDP was very high. But when British were there, the growth rate is more than the Mughal era, when it had grown by 22%. So in Mughal era it was only 22%, but in British era it is 70%. So during British era only India was developing more faster. An annual growth rate of 0.2%, or the longer period of mostly British East India Company rule from 1700 to 1850, where it grew 39%, or 0.22% annually. So when British East India Company came in 1700s, that time it was still slow only. It was just started. It is, but this when the East India Company came, it was 39%, and before that Mughal era it was 22%. But when after 1850 it was 70%. So because of British, India was growing more faster. However, by the end of British rule, India's economy represented a much smaller population of global GDP. Why this is? Because now America was discovered and population was growing there. They have very big large lands to develop, and their knowledge also was very high, and their wisdom also became very high. They invented so many things, and so their GDP increased in a very fast rate. In 1820, India's GDP was 16% of the global GDP. By 1870, it had fallen to 12%, and by 1947 to 4%. The Republic of India, founded in 1947, adopted central planning for most of its independent history with extensive public ownership, regulation, red tape, and trade barriers. After the 1991 economic crisis, the central government began liberalization. So here we understand that after 1947, the Republic of India, they adopted the central planning. So they do not want to trade with outsiders, and they wanted to develop on their own. So they closed their borders in terms of economy. So they don't want to do the trading. They don't want to do the trading with outside world that easily. So there was red tape and trade barriers were there, because India was not freely able to receive the knowledge from outer world, and neither it was able to give its knowledge to the outer world, and it was a confined country. After 1991 only, the then governments, they made policies to open the economy, and then now India is seeing the growth. Now also, because people go to other countries, the developed countries, they invest there, and they are bringing the dollars into India. They are bringing the dollars into India and developing India. India is not developing on its own. India is not bringing up new things in. It's very less. If at all it is bringing, if at all it is manufacturing new things, or new ideas are being developed, it is very less compared to other countries like US or the other countries. They are developing so fast because they are very advanced. Their thinking is very advanced. Their knowledge is very advanced. What they have in their hand is very high compared to India. So India is lagging behind. India is not lagging behind because of the British taking away the treasures of India. How much they would have taken? What can they take? What was India having then? India was having the industries of agriculture. Can anybody take away agriculture from a country? Can textile be taken away from the country? What kind of things were taken away from India? The small diamonds, or the little diamonds that were there with the kings and the queens made India poor? No. So this all is a big lie. This is a big fraud, where we are being cheated and we are being taught a lie to hate others, to hate the Westerners, to hate the Britishers. But they have made themselves rich by their own knowledge, their own hard work, their own unity. Those countries, we don't see they are divided on the any front. Actually, their governments are not divided on any fronts. Nowadays we find in US that people are divided, like conservatives and liberals. All these things now people are coming. Because of that, the people are going backward. They are not growing at the same rate that they were growing earlier. So Indians should know the truth, and they should follow truth. They should stop accusing Britishers. Actually, Britishers, they did good to India. When they came to India, India grew much faster. Otherwise, India would have been somewhere. Now it should have been some like African countries. It should have been like those African countries where the Britishers could not bring much change in them. They have big lands. Africa is a very big country, but they do not have the knowledge to grow their GDP. Now they are slowly growing. Now they are learning the things, and now their economy is growing slowly. But what a poor countries they are. They are poor countries not because other countries robbed them. It is a lie. Our Indians' mindset should change, and they should learn to develop themselves instead of blaming others. Always blaming others will not fetch us anything. It's not going to give us any benefit. So after knowing these truths, let us work together to uplift our country, bring about a great change in the GDP growth rate. Still our country is very slowly, it is around 7 or 8 GDP only. It's not growing at a very high speed like other economics. Okay, thank you all.